Hi, Tony here again from all the remote things, and I've got Joshua Kerievsky with me. How are you today?
I'm doing great. So good to see you again after so many years, and it's a pleasure to be on your show.
It's great to have you on. And yes, as Joshua said, I was very lucky to have met Joshua out here when he was out here for Australia. I should just say Josh. I'm sorry, I'm being very formal, aren't I, Josh?
Josh is fine.
So yes, Josh was out here for Agile Australia. We had the pleasure of having on a podcast that I used to run, the Agile Revolution. But he's here today in the flesh. For those who don't know you, can you just introduce yourself a touch?
Yeah, I run a company called Industrial Logic, and we've been in business for about 26 years. And it's our focus has always been on, what makes the software industry better. I named a company. I was infatuated with Industrial Light and Magic. That company back in the 90s was doing all kinds of incredible things in the movie industry with special effects. So Industrial Logic was inspired by that. Yeah, we specialize in, you know, much better software development, better psychological safety on teams. Anything that leads to higher performance, we're into it. Better product management, those things, and we've been involved in agility and the agile movement since before it was called agile back in the 90s.
Yes, and I had the pleasure of reading some of your early book and knowing you before you became the modern agile man. So a lot of people will know you from modern agile. Other sectors will know you for industrial logic, and some will know you for refactoring, etc., etc. So we'll do the traverse of that in a moment. Um, what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is you have a new book. So your first book came out, we were just talking about it off air, but I read it at 25 or 26, something around there, but it came out in about 2004, and that was really about refactoring and the patterns. It's taken you that long to come to a new book, which is Joy of Agility, and we'll talk about that in a moment. What took so long to get there?
One word: e-learning.
Okay.
So what I ended up doing from after publishing Refactoring to Patterns was becoming. I first of all, I love training. I love teaching. I love learning how to really make a difference in people's skills. E-learning became this thing that, first of all, I built my first e-learning course in 1999. Why then? Well, my first daughter was born then, so it's like I'd like to be home more often and spend time with her. So that was the inspiration for building an online course. And then the second course we rolled out in 2004, and then by 2006 I really said I want to build like the state of the art e-learning system that would rival a human instructor. And so we started building that, and it's a lot of work to produce really good e-learning.
Uh,
It's a multimedia experience, right? So there's videos, there's exercises, there's quizzes of different types, and it's just a boatload of work. So over the succeeding years, from I'd say 2006 and 7 onwards till 2014 or so, 2015, just a tremendous amount of work on teaching, refactoring, test-driven development, code smells, faking and mocking, design patterns, all these things that we've found to be so useful. We built these e-learning albums around, and it just took a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah, that's an interesting journey. I knew you were doing all of those things, but of course, when you put it in that premise, that's a lot of stuff and doesn't leave a lot of room for writing books. Because anybody who's been trying to write a book, it's not an easy thing to do either. All right, so let's talk joy of agility, and let's first of all, it's not the joy of agility, it's
It's
joy
not,
of
yeah,
agility.
and it's not
Let's
the and it's not the joy of agile either. For some reason, I called it joy of agility just to make life difficult.
No, I like it. I always prefer the word agility anyway, because I think agile's fairly pocketed in where we came from and the Agile Manifesto, but agility is the product of what we're trying to create and do um, as we apply those things, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, let me, I'll just really quickly tell a story about Sir Richard Branson. Okay, so he was stuck in an airport in late 1970s. He's with his girlfriend. I think they were somewhere in the British Virgin Islands, and they were planning to fly to Puerto Rico. So they're with a bunch of other passengers, in the terminal, and then the airline says your flight's been canceled. We'll let you know when it's going to show up again. Now most of us would simply, you know, go to a restaurant, go to a bar. Back then there were no cell phones, so you're not gonna play backgammon on your cell phone. Um, Richard Branson calls a charter airline, and the charter airline says we'd be happy to fly you. And Richard Branson finds out the cost, does some math, creates a sign, and walks around the terminal saying $39 US one-way flight to Puerto Rico. Sells every seat, and they fly uneventfully to Puerto Rico. Why am I telling the story? Because he was incredibly agile, right? He was an agile traveler that day. He was quick, he was resourceful, he was adaptable to a situation, right? There were no weather issues. There was just simply a canceled flight for no good reason. He found a solution in a quick, easy, graceful way. He was quick, he was resourceful, he was adaptable. So I basically, you know, trace the birth of Agile to Richard Branson in that airport. No, I don't. I'm kidding. Agility, there's thousands of stories of agility, right? For thousands of years, right? Let's get out of this mindset that Agile began at an event in Utah when people went skiing and met together and created a manifesto. This is nonsense. I'm not degrading that event, but agility is something humans have been doing for centuries.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with you. Yeah. What I want to know is, now you've called it joy of agility, and we know I've used the word agility. Talk to me about what the book is about.
Sure. I wanted to do several things with this book. First of all, there are hundreds of Agile books, right? Hundreds.
Very true.
Why
Very true.
why write another one, right? And I really after publishing Refactoring to Patterns and come to today, where this book's on the verge of being published, um, I learned a lot. I learned a tremendous amount in building the e-learning. We were like, hey, let's do continuous deployment and figure out what that's like, right? And we were continuously deploying behavior to our e-learning system, and lots of learning and more learning. Lean, everything from lean manufacturing, all the Poppendike's books, and all of the concepts from lean that influenced my agile, skill set, morphed, and it morphed again, and basically lots of things changed over time. So I wasn't ready to write a book because I kept learning more stuff. And it's not to say I haven't stopped learning, but what I have found is that agility was important within the large organizations we've been helping. Boy, you couldn't just work with the developers on agility. You had to work with the product managers, and you had to work with the HR folks, and you had to work with the sales and marketing people. And, after a while, you start to get really tired of silos and say, we really need to have agility across the board, agile thinking, agile ways of working. So, naturally, my own concepts of agile started to get bigger and broader. And then they finally just leapt over the walls and said, forget just tech. This completely applies to any human endeavor, right? Because you end up, if you're in an agile mindset, you end up bringing agility into your home, right? And you look for ways to be agile in your own home. Um, so it's something that I'm passionate about. And we've seen a lot of degradation of the term agile. We've seen a lot of, unfortunate things happen when there's money involved. Things can go sour. So a lot of people have said agile is a dead word to me. Don't talk to me about agile. I don't even want to hear the word. There's a lot of people that are just like turning their backs on the word, not the idea. So this book was my chance to just say, I'm not going to focus on anything negative. I'm going to focus on the joy that comes from being agile, from genuinely being agile, that joy that we get when we're able to do something with quick, easy grace, or when we're able to be quick and resourceful and adaptable, the way Branson was on that day in the airport.
That's brilliant. I love that the talk there about the word agile. My good friend Craig Smith, shout out to Craig, who you know,
I know, Craig.
he's done a couple of talks, and one of those we use it quite often is that we're on a bandwagon to call it raccoon. Why not? It's actually the product of what you do, not the actual word, right? So
That's right. That's right.
yeah,
Like, show me the results. Show me the results, not the process you used, right? I'd like to see what are the outcomes of you being agile, right? That's yeah.
yeah, I think that's an important thing, and I guess that so that brings us to modern agile and the click in with modern agile and the joy of agility, because they obviously have some symbiotic stuff there to make them work together. But I want to go back a bit further and then come back along that way, right? So we talked about your early stuff for 2004. How do we get from refactoring patterns to modern agile? What was the journey that brought that about and made it happen? Because it's an interesting thing when I see modern agile and I see what you did before, and I know there's a gap in there somewhere where something's happened to bring that along.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, like in writing refactoring to patterns, that took about 3.5 years because, of course, I'm working full time and being a dad and husband and also just trying to produce a book. So 3.5 years later, that book finally comes out. Now, during that 3.5 year period, and even before it, I was heavily involved in extreme programming projects, all kinds of projects that were agile, helping customers and companies around the world learn this stuff. Um, I remember after 2001 going to Estonia, and we basically helped a whole bunch of Estonians learn extreme programming. And to this day, they're like, "Wow, what you did there really changed, the face of development in Estonia," because we went on to other companies and Skype and all this other stuff, like sharing what we were learning, especially from extreme programming. So while writing refactoring to patterns, I was dying to be writing about this agile stuff, but I couldn't. I had to stay focused on writing, a book on refactoring to patterns. So as soon as it was done, I was back to sort of writing blogs and sharing stuff about what we do. Um, so fast forward to around 2015. Um, at that point, we'd abandoned story points and velocity calculations, right? So one of the things that I can say is, you know, when you're actually when you're actually implementing agile processes, you're learning, and I'm a huge fan of the concept of we are discovering better ways, right? So we're constantly experimenting and trying to push the limits and make things simpler and better and easier. Um, so we would be like, okay, let's stop using story points and velocity. Let's try something different. We tried hours, like actually estimating in real hours, and people hated it. So we stopped that. Then we said, let's just try not estimating at all and just doing very small bits of work, small batches, as Lean calls it, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days maximum. That ended up being really wonderful for us. We liked it and kept doing it ever since. So our our approach to agility changed and changed and changed to the point where I end up at a conference in Prague in I think it was either 2016 or 2015. And basically, I gave a speech. It was on engineering, which is this term I made up around onzen means safety in um, Japanese. So I gave this keynote speech on engineering, and then afterwards there was an open space, and in the open space, I'm hearing about story points, and I'm hearing about sprints, and I'm hearing about one thing after another that we'd long abandoned, right? We had abandoned it 7, 8 years earlier. And I was like, I don't hear anybody talking about lean startup ideas, lean UX ideas, continuous deployment, mob programming. I don't hear anybody talking about this here at this conference. So I just wrote on a piece of paper, modern agile, and put a space up for that. And so 50 people showed up, and people were fascinated. I was like, no, we stopped doing that, and we stopped doing that, and we stopped doing that. We do this other thing now. We do continuous flow. We don't do sprints anymore. We do forecasting instead of using velocity as a way to know what we're going to get done. All kinds of things, story mapping, you name it. And people just didn't know about that stuff. So the word modern was really just to get people to realize there's a lot of this old fashioned stuff that's taken place over the last 10 to 15 years in agile software development, right? Those practices. And we've discovered that there's better ways, just like the manifesto says. So modern has meant, modern doesn't mean the 2016 version of agile. It means always be modernizing, always be finding better ways, always be looking for a simpler, safer, more streamlined approach to getting great work done.
That's great. And the other thing about it is then, of course, you came up with the principles that went around that, right? So for those that don't really know them, make people awesome, deliver value continuously, make safety a prerequisite, and of course, experiment and learn rapidly. So
Yes.
how did you bring to those two to light the journey to get
Well,
there?
yeah. So basically, it started with these open space events where I was just basically, free form talking about all the new stuff, and gradually that led to a diagram and a blog about modern agile. And at that point, it wasn't even make people awesome; it said make users awesome, which comes straight out of Kathy Sierra's book, which is called Badass, Making Users Awesome. Her
No,
philosophy is don't make an awesome product, make an awesome user. Make the user awesome. Focus on that user. And I loved that philosophy and thought it was fantastic. So the early version of Modern Agile was like a Venn diagram. It wasn't just four principles, though. It was these four major categories and then a bunch of practices in there. And the practices, there were about 12. And then I thought, I was talking to my friend Heidi, who worked at a company in Santa Barbara, and um, they had a practice at their company, a company called Appfolio, and it was called the Wall of Happiness. And the Wall of
way.
Happiness was all of these customers would write in these wonderful things. Thank you so much for this awesome product. You really made my life better. Here's some cookies. But they would print out these statements from happy customers, and they had an entire wall filled with them.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And I thought, wow, what a great practice to do that. And I thought, you know, that's a great practice. Does that belong in modern agile? And then I'm like, but there's hundreds of practices that could effectively be in there. So like, why do I only have 12? And why am I racking my brain to try to fit 12? It just doesn't work. Got rid of them. Got rid of them and just said, let's just focus on these four principles. And then realized as well that make users awesome really meant we wanted to refer to the ecosystem, to everyone in the ecosystem, not only the users, but the people making the software or making the product, the people funding it, the people managing it, and so on. So make people awesome became the new principle. And those four principles just fell out of all that. Those open space events, the writing of a blog, thinking, chatting with my colleagues, everything I do goes through tremendous revision by my community, talking to my colleagues. Every book I've written, every blog I've written, Modern Agile Wheel, those four principles, they've all had feedback from my colleagues and friends. So it's never just me. Um, but that's how the four principles came about.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear that, because I've always wondered how you got there. I want to pick you up on something you said just a little bit earlier, which is sort of departing a little bit from the modern agile thing, but you were talking about extreme programming. And myself and my compatriots, Craig again, shout out. We were thrown into a little room with a book, and said, try this new agile thing. And because we had the white book and extreme programming, and we went on that extreme programming, the XP journey. But as as Scrum became more prominent, we'll just use that prominent. Some of the other things became more prominent. XP sort of was there, but it's not there, but it is there. But to my mind, the extreme programming is actually more valid today than it ever was, because of the
Absolutely.
technicality of the world that we're entering into. So I just thought I'd ask that question of you, because you've obviously been doing it for a long time, and your thoughts on that now?
I mean, we still find a lot of the practices in extreme programming to be extremely useful. I think our if anything, we've become a little more nuanced in how we think about things. Extreme programming did not mention continuous deployment. I remember, I was fortunate enough to have Kent Beck send me an email or something. He's like, you've got to watch this video. It's this guy, Timothy Fitz. And Timothy Fitz worked closely with Eric Ries at the company that would, basically be the inspiration for the lean startup. And Timothy Fitz gave a talk in Silicon Valley, and it was called Doing the Impossible 50 Times a Day. And this is somewhere around 2007. Um, and they were talking about continuously deploying to millions of customers, 50 times a day, and how they managed to do that. And that was like, wow, take XP, and it wasn't really talking about that. So it brought it to a whole new level. Of course, Jez Humble and Chris Farley
Yeah.
Ended up writing their book on continuous delivery. I learned about it through Timothy Fitz and that work with Eric Ries's company. But regardless, things change, right? XP had iterations. Um, Today, we do continuous flow, and we find it to be far simpler, not just for advanced people, but for brand new people brand new to this stuff, beginners. We find it easier to say, let's teach you how to slice things thin and how to work in small batches. But the size of the batch doesn't really matter as long as it's small. I don't care if it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. It just needs to be on the small side. So there's a lot of things that have morphed and changed. My approach to like the technical practices, which I hate to call them that, but is much more nuanced. You can be an expert in test-driven development. I often have people who join my company, Industrial Logic, and they're like, oh wow, now I'm here at Industrial Logic. I've got to be, I've got to do things really the right way. And then we're currently building some training games. So some of them involve like hand gestures on a mobile phone.
Oh yeah.
And
Cool.
sometimes people in the company are like, oh, I've never done that before, but I'm game. I'm gonna write the code for that. And then they think they have to test drive it. And it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second here. You're just learning how to do this. You're learning the code base. You're learning how to do gestures. You don't have to test drive that. You're just sketching like an artist would sketch something real quick and then throw out the sketch. And once they're satisfied, start actually crafting something. And so what I find is that once you learn great practices, you also have to learn when not to use them. When is it more efficient to work really, rough and quick, and don't do it in this highly engineered fashion where, I'll test drive code when I know it's going to have a long shelf life. If it's not going to have a long shelf life at all, if I'm just experimenting real quick, I'm not necessarily going to test drive the code. I'm not saying never, but so, that's a quick lesson that they learn. It's just that there's a time to just work in different styles. It's not clean code all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I see, and if you look at it now, we've moved into this area of digitality, right? Everything is electronic, everything is digital. Those practices become so much more relevant even than when we were first doing this stuff. And then you add over the top of it things like modern agile, the heart of agile. You've got some good assemblies to pair of you, all that sort of stuff, right? You bring that to agility. You need both parts of that stack. You often hear people
Yes,
talking. You often hear people or organizations talking about business agility. But when they talk about business agility, they've gone far to the right and go, oh, well, we just need to concentrate on the stuff up the top. The problem is they then sort of take the foot off the pedal with the stuff that really creates the product, and you don't see the focus on the CCID, or you don't see the focus on those XP practices that we always just took for granted. Are you
absolutely.
seeing that?
Absolutely. Like continuous integration, for example, and an emergent design or evolutionary design, which are, very important to extreme programming. They are more important than ever. I mean, what I still see in large organizations, I just got off the phone with one. We're helping them, and they just asked us to help them on a new strategic thing. I can't talk a lot about it, but I can talk abstractly that the way they're approaching it right now, I hope to change this, but the way they're approaching it right now is it's a big new strategic thing. It's ultimately to make the customer experience better. But it's like there's a program manager, and the program manager is going to work with different teams to get them all to build their components and then try to integrate at various times. And you know, right? This is like late integration. It's not good risk management. It's it's poised for sluggishness, if you will. It's poised to be sluggish. And we hope to influence them and say, well, why don't we build your new customer facing behavior that's so cool, and it is cool. Why don't we do it incrementally? Why don't we get the 5 different teams to build a walking skeleton and then add flesh to the bones over time, so that we're integrating all the time, so that we're doing emergent design and evolving a solution. It's better risk management. There's greater chance that we'll have something up and running to show you. We could probably even deploy something sooner that's maybe not doing every bell and whistle, but does a lot of what you want. Get that into the stores. This stuff still is not well known, and yes, extreme programming talked all about that.
Yeah, brilliant. And I just realized I said CCID before, so I don't know how you would do that. Let's try CICD. That might help.
CICD. Yeah, I think I knew. Yeah, I knew what you meant.
It came out, and then I went, "Did I really say that?" Anyway, let's move on. What I want to talk a little bit about is, where's modern agile going? Where are you? Where are
Sure.
you heading? What are the things that you're doing? Because I know that you never stay sedimentary in one spot. So let's talk about where you're headed.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely have had a few people say to me, modern agile is great. They got your 4 principles in there, but people still need to know what to do. They need to know what do I do? And I've heard that many times. And at first I was like, well, it's pretty straightforward. Take the principles and start to just apply them to your specific situation. Like in other words, make safety a prerequisite. Think about your environment, think about your people, think about all that stuff, and where are there safety gaps? Where are there situations where people are fundamentally unsafe? Is it unsafe to speak up, for example, in a meeting? Is it unsafe to talk to so and so because they'll fire you or penalize you if you say something they don't like? Um, and you try to walk people down that path to just go from a principle to a specific problem, and then apply the principle to the problem and start to address it. This is not a natural thing for most people. They don't just naturally do it. Most people want to be told, what do I do? Give me a framework, give me a recipe to follow, which I understand. So one of the reasons for writing Joy of Agility was that I wanted to, and I didn't call it Joy of Agility when I first started writing the book. What I started doing was documenting stories of agility, actual stories of real agility, whether it was in software teams or Richard Branson in the airport or Massimo Bottura, the famous chef, and what happened one day in his kitchen. I mean, stories of being quick, resourceful, and adaptable. I wanted to share those stories, and I'd share them in workshops on modern agile and try to get people to understand agility is this thing that is an adjective. Agile is an adjective, an agile surgeon, an agile doctor, an agile team. It's an adjective. It describes, it's not a noun. You don't say, agile, the noun, the agile thing. It's unfortunately, that's when people start to think of it as a packaged product management type of thingy. Whereas I think of it as a very dynamic concept, right? It's what makes a person or a team or something agile is being quick and resourceful and adaptable, being quick, easy, and graceful in your movement. So the stories were my way of saying, okay, if you don't know what to do because of the modern agile's 4 principles, tell you what, read these stories and see if they give you enough inspiration so that you can figure out what to do. And so as I started writing the stories, they started to get more and more, you know, stories. And before you know it, I had 50 stories and then 60, 80, and so on. It's like a long list of stories. What do you do with that? You can't publish a book of all stories. You got to have some organization to it, some parts. So I was like, okay, great. What is each story really communicating? What's the principle behind it or something like that? And I played with the modern agile principles, but there were stories in there that were describing something that wasn't in modern agile. So eventually what happened, which was, this was very emergent. very, very emergent because I didn't expect this. 6 mantras popped out of the process of trying to figure out where do these stories go. And that took many months because, I'd have the idea for a name of a mantra, and then I'd change it when I realized something else. So it was a kind of birthing of these mantras. And I'm happy to say that a few of them aren't even ones I created. They're phrases that are very popular. But I find to be extremely useful as a mantra. What is a mantra? It's something you contemplate every single day, maybe many times a day, and it affects your behavior. It affects your decision making. It's a significant part of your life. It's a mantra. So one of those is be quick, but don't hurry. And not easy to understand that. Not at all easy. When you talk about speed, some people want to run the other way. Like, wait a minute. They're like, agile is not about going quick. So, well, you're right. It's not equal to going quick, but it's definitely quickness is a part of agility. Every definition you'll ever see will say that it involves quickness. So, but it doesn't involve hurrying and rushing and being hasty and making tons of mistakes that are costly. That's not agile. That's just being out of control. So in one entire portion of the book called, so be quick, but don't hurry, is filled with stories that basically show, what does this really mean? What did Tom DeMarco mean when he talked about Slack? What does it mean to slow down? And what is good slow and what's bad slow, right? If I'm sharpening my saw, that's probably a pretty good idea if I'm cutting down a tree, because I'm taking the time to get a sharper saw. That's a good slow. Bad slow, well, I'm trying to saw with a very dull blade, and it's taken forever. So the stories in the book are all about, how do I get you to understand a mantra better, so that when it comes to doing, right, going from principle or mantra to practice, you got some better ideas about, what are the aspects of each element of agility that you got to think about.
That's an interesting approach, and I hadn't thought that. And when's the book out?
The book comes out in February of 2023. So publishers, this is a publisher that I was very happy to be associated with. It's a big publisher, and they have certain windows when they don't release books. So one of those is like from, I think, Thanksgiving in the US, which is, November timeframe, all the way through the end of January. They do not release books during that time.
All right.
So the book.
Yeah, you want people to be looking for that. That's all. That's why I was asking the question. Because people, after they see this, are going to be going, well, how do I get my hands on it, right? So that'll be the next thing for you, Josh.
That'd be great. Well, there's some ways to get on our email list about it, and but yes, I'm very excited about this book. I poured my heart and soul into it for about 3 years of writing this thing, and very happy to be putting it out in the world.
Well, it's good. It's good. Look, there's one other thing I really wanted to ask you, because, and I do that with a lot of people that come on here, but you're traversing the world with different organizations and different people. But now, obviously, I don't need to talk about why remote and hybrids become so widespread, and probably, as we all know, that's not going to go back to the way it was. How do you see the way you're working with agility, the way organizations are working with agility, embracing that now?
I mean, what's delightful is that for many, many, many years, we tried to, convince some of our customers that we could work remote and still be quite effective. And, because basically, I care about people, right? So especially the people that work for me, I care about them. I would never ask them to do something that I myself would not do. So you take a typical coach here who has a family, and say, yeah, okay, I need you to be traveling every single week, and you work a 5-day week. So guess what? You're also going to be traveling on your Sundays and come home on a Saturday. It's like, okay, you're never going to see your family. We would never do that. Never. So instead, we found all kinds of solutions like, okay, work 2 weeks out of the month, and then maybe we can find you a way to do some remote billing, so you're helping a customer remotely. But a lot of times the customers will be like, nope, you got to be here in person. So then we're like, okay, do a 3 or 4 day week, but do 3 of those, just whatever we could do to to make enough money to pay their salary and their health care, and also give them a decent life so they could, family's important. Um, and then COVID came, and all of a sudden, every single customer of ours was like, "Sure, you can work remote."
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like a button switch, and then we're working remote. And now we were not new to working remote. First of all, we have been deeply involved in training, so we were often doing remote training, e-learning, all that stuff. Plus, my company's been a distributed company from the beginning. Yeah, so while there's a few people in the local area that I happen to live in, many of the other people work all over the world, all over the U.S., Canada, anywhere. So we were very accustomed to that. Um, so as our company is accustomed to working with remote tools and remote people, um, we had to help our customers do that as well. And what was delightful was that they were so open minded to it. Well, there was no choice really, right? We had lockdowns, things. Um, and it's been challenging at times when customers will be like, nope, we're not turning on our cameras. So you can't see someone. I'd have coaches come to me saying, this is really, soul drenching, or so it's killing me to be working with people that won't turn on their damn cameras. So, challenges like that, certainly, like mob programming, we found people just started innovating and creating some really amazing software to make it even easier to do in a remote context. Just tremendous adaptation to the situation, and I think it really changed a lot of people's perspectives. Like, whereas a lot of the early agile literature in the agile software development world would say you got to be working face to face, you got to be in person together. I think now you can look back on that and say, well, that was a period of time before COVID, where people thought that that was the case. Now, tools like Miro and Mural, all these highly collaborative tools are, we're doing these sessions, and people are writing on post-it notes, and like you got 20. I did a meeting the other day, 30, 40 people, and doing chartering, agile chartering, and all these wonderful hands and people doing stuff, and stuff's just emerging out of nowhere. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. So I think agility transcends, um, you know, the narrow-minded idea that you got to do it all in person. I think that's we've got to get past that. We got to get past a lot of things, but agile is not a software development thing. It is an adjective. Agile is not an in-person thing or a remote thing. It's it's simply both. It's you can be agile anywhere. So yeah,
Yeah, and as practitioners, or anybody who's involved in the agile world, my call out to you, and based on that conversation as well, is this is where we excel. This is, as a community, we have worked in the grey. That's where agility works at its best, in the grey. And with the kind of environments we have now, working remote hybrid, we have the tools, we have the way to do this. We just need to get past exactly what you're saying there and say, how do we apply that? And, the remote agility framework came about because of that. And this is not about it,
yeah,
but just in general,
yeah.
that's why it came about, was because we could see that situation. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, Josh.
That's great. Yeah, people need to understand that it's great that a framework like that has come out, because I think people need to understand that it's not like they're doing a inferior form of agility because they're now doing remote tooling instead of in person. I'm not degrading in person. I get tired of being alone sometimes and want to be around other people, and but it transcends agility, transcends these things. It is not one thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Look, we could continue on as I wish we could, but we're very close to the end of our time. So, what I want to do is just ask you, how do people get in touch? How can people get involved with modern agility, industrial logic, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, industriallogic.com is our website, and modernagile.org is a wonderful community of people. It's non-commercial. There's absolutely no commercial stuff there. We sell a few things that we basically sell them at cost. So there's stickers and other little tidbits. And there's a wonderful Slack community that's very active for Modern Agile. The joy of agility. See, there I go. I'm calling it the joy of agility. So, see, even I make this mistake. Joy of Agility, the book, and what we're doing with that is emerging. So there will be a joyofagility.com website coming. Currently, there's a web page for it on Industrial Logic's website under the content menu. So you can find some more there. And I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So happy to chat with folks, and always happy to do so.
Brilliant. And while you're at it, I heartily recommend just popping onto Josh's LinkedIn. Josh is, like myself, a very avid reader. And I must say, I do look on there because you bring these books up and I go, oh, I haven't read that one, so I'll read it. So if you ever want to find some amazing reading, have a quick look on there, because it's often giving you a number of books to read.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I do like to share that stuff. I have a terrible book habit, and it means like there's just almost no room for books in the house anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, should I get it on Kindle? Because then they won't take up more room. But I kind of like physical books too. So
that nice dog-eared thing and the tactile experience doesn't go away, does it? So
there's nothing like it. I'm
with
all about dog-earing pages. Yes.
Brilliant. Look, if you're watching this and you really enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, so that you keep up with all of the remote thing episodes. Why don't you also join us in our new community on remoteaf.co? Click the community button. We've got a big community there and lots of community events. Josh, fantastic to have you on all the remote things. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tony. Really, really loved chatting with you today.
Many thanks.